NRA-TV with Grant Stinchfield.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. It may not be a surprise for you to learn that I'm not really a hugs kind of guy. I don't get warm fuzzies over a basket of puppies, but just because I don't cry at the end of The Notebook doesn't mean you can label me an extremist. Every day the left slaps that label on me and of course all of you, the 5 million members of the NRA. It isn't right, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. Here's part of a recent conversation I had with Chris Cox, the executive director of the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action. I want to call us hardliners and extremists. And what I don't get, Chris, is that the left just doesn't understand that the Second Amendment is a fundamental right and rights are not up for debate. If that makes us extremists, well, then so be it, I guess.
I've always laughed when I've heard those descriptions used against us. Persistent, dogged, no question. Those are accurate and those are fair. But what group in America has been called extreme for simply wanting to be left alone? Go focus on people who misuse firearms and leave those of us who are law-abiding gun owners alone. That's our wild and extreme agenda. On top of that wild and extreme, hope of self-autonomy and not having government all over our backs, on top of that, as good citizens, we're teaching Boy Scouts. We're giving grants to 4-H. We're out there doing, adaptive shooting opportunities for people with disabilities. We're trying to expand hunting opportunities. We're trying to get people out in the field, from wounded warriors to moms and daughters and sons and fathers out there to understand and experience what all the great benefits of sports shooting and target shooting and hunting and all the different wonderful aspects of Second Amendment freedom. So, again, I just always laugh because all we want is the truth and to be left alone, and that's not an extremist position.
No, it is not. In fact, it's the position of just about all of us here at the NRA, all 5 million members, that is. I'll be sharing more of that interview with Chris Cox a little bit later as well. The violent leftist group that calls themselves Antifa is planning rallies. Call them rallies, I call them protests, and more than that. They are planning them all over the United States on Saturday. This is the same violent group that burned cars and destroyed buildings on the UC Berkeley campus back in February. It's the same group that attacked conservative Kiara Robles because she disagrees with them. It's about lawlessness. It is about as lawless as it gets, in fact. A prime example of why we call them the violent left. Now Kiara is suing not just the people responsible for the attack, but also Berkeley and the police department for standing by and coddling these violent thugs. She described how bad it got.
I'm watching my friends fall to the floor. One of my friends gets beat, with these flagpoles that they're protesting, peacefully with. And I mean, I was lucky that I was able to jump the fence and get out of there in time, but it was very, very difficult to watch people, that are your people, on the floor and not be able to help them. I mean, we all wanted to defend ourselves, but they make it impossible for you to do that. They come prepared.
Well, joining me now is the attorney who filed the lawsuit on behalf of Kiara. Larry Klayman is with Freedom Watch. Larry, it is always great to have you on the program.
Good day. How you doing?
So, Larry, I'm not surprised that these groups are going to have these protests, and really, I'm sure they'll amount to riots in many cities across the country. I am angered by the fact that they're going to have one in New York City, especially after a terror attack, that they don't just go ahead and cancel that one.
Well, yeah, it's highly dangerous, and we do know that these terrorist groups are very sympathetic. I'm actually speaking in a Freudian way because Antifa is a domestic terrorist group. They have an affinity to radical Muslim terrorists as well. I mean, they are financed by some of the same people. George Soros finances Antifa. He has given money to CARE, a radical Islamic group in this country. They have an association, okay? And I don't know whether they're working together or not, but I do know that they have common interests, which is to bring down this country. And it's highly volatile in New York City today. It's inappropriate, and I hope that the police are fully prepared.
What do you think the end game is from the billionaires like George Soros who fund these groups? And CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations, does have ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. That has been proven over and over again. What is the reasoning behind George Soros? Is it that he wants the destruction of society as we know it?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. Look, his history, and I'll say it, and I'm not afraid of defamation suits or anything like that. We know that he and his father were collaborators with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in World War II. They were taking property away from their fellow Jews as those Jews were going to gas chambers and dying. And this is somebody who wants to destroy the United States from within. He's trying to deconstruct it. He hopes that if he brings us down to ground zero, that it'll now be built up in his highly socialist, leftist, atheist, anti-gun, anti-everything that's in our Constitution concept of what the country should be about. He is an evil person, and we have sued him in the past, and of course they're quite upset about that, but it's probably not the last time we're going to have to sue him. He originally was in this case with Antifa. Well, he's now going to be part of the case in terms of discovery, and we'll see where it goes from there. But this case is going forward. It was assigned to a judge, a leftist judge, who actually taught school at the University of Berkeley Law School and also went to Berkeley. So we're concerned about the neutrality of this judge, but I'm hopeful that she'll be able to call it like it is. Now, the University of California at Berkeley and the city of Berkeley are squealing like stuck pigs, and I know about that. My family were pork packers, okay? And they are deathly frightened of this lawsuit because it's the first time they've really been held accountable for furthering this leftist communist ideology, which also is designed to bring down the country. It's a long story at Berkeley. I would never send my kid there, my God. But this is the most leftist, most radical school in the United States. It's funded by the people of California. It's a real disgrace.
So this is the difference, Larry, between groups like yours, guys like you and me, and then the difference between Antifa. We want to fight back, and we want to fight to make sure that freedom rings true across this country, that free speech is legitimate and it's protected. You do it through a court case, through the legal system. We do it here with our voice and through truth. Antifa tries to do it on the streets and destroy and even burn down cities and towns.
That's right. You know, there's some very good novels that have been written, you know, in the 20th century. Atlas Shrugged, George Orwell's 1984. What they want is a despotic government. They want everybody to be on their level. There's no achievement. There's no anything. It's basic communism, and it's pretty clear what they're after. And they will resort to any means, just like the Bolsheviks did in the streets of Russia in 1917. They're following the Bolshevik model. So they first have to destroy the country, and then they'll seize control. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's frightening, really, and it's one of the reasons why we find it so imperative that we've got to expose this group for what it is, continuously call them out. It's why we send guys like Chuck Holton to the front lines of this war on America to cover these thugs that take to the streets. Larry, lastly, how do you think this lawsuit of yours will turn out?
I'm optimistic. We know that, well, Berkeley and the university system run by Janet Napolitano, an Obama appointee of the Department of Homeland Security. Now she's running the California system in Berkeley, and the city of Berkeley. They are trying to get out of the case through a motion to dismiss. Now I'm concerned because the judge went to Berkeley. Okay, she has that tie, and she's also a leftist. But Antifa itself has been forced to answer the complaint, and they are firmly part of this case. They're not getting out of it. They assaulted Kiara Robles, this very brave gay woman, and she's very proud of that. And she was there to see Milo, who's also gay, and she's conservative. And she's a very special person. And I don't believe that they'll be able to get out of it. At least Antifa will survive. And if Berkeley is dismissed, we will take it up on appeal, all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary.
Larry, this is interesting, though, because Antifa, we think of it so much as a movement. Have you found the leadership where the leadership of this group would have to answer? And is there an organized head of this group?
There is, and we've served them, and they are part of the case.
All right, very, very good. Well, I know you'll keep us updated to all of it. Thank you, Larry Klayman. We appreciate all the work you do for freedom, and thanks for coming on the program.
You're welcome. God bless you.
God bless you as well. One of those Antifa protests, as we said earlier, is planned for New York City, just days after that horrific terror attack. Let's bring in veteran Army Ranger Frontlines correspondent Chuck Holton, who has followed these riots from city to city. Chuck, another one Saturday. Who knows what will happen?
Yes, Grant. As a matter of fact, in the last few days, news has come out about some potential collaboration between Antifa members and ISIS, believe it or not. It's a book that's coming out by a best-selling author named Ed Klein called All Out War, The Plot to Destroy Trump. And in that book, he details that members of Antifa went to Germany to participate in the G20 protests that happened earlier this year. And while they were there, the FBI had a task force over there to report on these radical groups, and they believe that some of these members of Antifa met with the leader, with an Al-Qaeda leader in Hamburg, and discussed acquiring weapons, even bomb-making materials, and that sort of thing, and ways that they could collaborate with ISIS. So this is a pretty startling revelation, even for Antifa. They claim that this protest tomorrow in New York will be peaceful, but what we've seen in the past is that previous protests they've thrown have been anything but, and I don't think that we can expect a whole lot out of them tomorrow.
Well, we know that they are quick to resort to violence. We know they're quick to resort to destruction of property. I would expect to see that, at least in some cities across America tomorrow. It is amazing to me now that you would think that you would have a group like Antifa partner with a group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Both groups, then, it is confirmed, simply want the destruction of life as we know it here in the United States.
That's right, and they are being funded by George Soros. He just gave away $18 billion of his fortune into his foundation. This is not charitable giving. This is money that will be designated to fund enemies of America, people who hate our way of life, people who hate our Constitution. And, you know, George Soros made his money as a short seller. That means he bet on things going badly, and that's basically all that he does.
Yeah, and this would play right into that. If he does destroy, and he is short on the market, he could stand to make more billions off of really ruining lives out there. That's right. and ruining and destroying America. A very sad take. Chuck, lastly, the investigation into this terror attack. Any updates for us?
Well, like I mentioned, we were seeing large convoys of heavy trucks coming down the West Side Highway here, loaded down with concrete barricades that they're going to have to be putting all along that route. You can imagine as they prepare for the marathon on Sunday that they're going to have to put up barricades along 26.2 miles, and that's only about 1/10 of the barricades they're going to need to barricade off the bike paths in New York City. Those are the ones that, you know, you kind of wonder about this terrorist that he chose to commit that act on Tuesday and run down 8 bicyclists when he could have waited until Sunday and could have drove through the marathon. You know, we have seen across the globe now with these kind of ISIS attacks using ramming as a weapon that they are more deadly than firearms attacks. You look at the one in Nice, or I'm sorry, yeah, over in France that took place last year. It killed over 80 people. You look at the ones in Germany and in Sweden and everywhere else. This is becoming a very common tactic, and what it means is that all across the world, no place is safe, and you can't afford to not have your head on a swivel.
If one thing we are lucky about, it's that many of these radicalized ISIS fighters, like the one we saw in New York, end up being dimwits. They're not the brightest bulbs. They're not the sharpest tacks, and that absolutely helps us fight back against them, because he could have done a lot more damage if he was just a little bit smarter about it.
Yeah, you know, as we connect those two between ISIS and Antifa, there again, I think that's a similarity that they have. But not only that, you know, the FBI and other organizations have been working to infiltrate these using technology. For example, setting up honeypots, fake Facebook pages where they're encouraging people to sign up for Antifa events and that sort of thing, so they can identify who these people are. But let me tell you, that technology only goes so far, and they need human intelligence in these organizations to try to head these things off before they happen. And there's only one way to do that. That's recruit people, pay them and train them, and get them inside these organizations. And that's a very dangerous and difficult proposition.
Well, both groups certainly have that in common. I heard one person call them dim-witted moonbats. That's about what they amount to. Chuck Holton, thank you for coming on the program, as always. Dana Lash will join me at the top of the next hour. We'll be talking about the newest effort to shut down President Trump's message. I'm Grant Stinchfield for NRA-TV.
You're watching NRA-TV with Grant Stinchfield.